Introduction into, I just want to let everybody know that this meeting is recorded, so keep that in mind. We do post the recordings of our meetings and our webinars on our website. So if you miss any part of today, you're welcome to go to our website and check that out. Let's see here. Okay, well, I do know that we do have several elected officials who will be joining us today, so I will go ahead and announce them right now. We will have Jacqueline Simon. She's North Monterey County Fire Protection District Vice President. Gail Morton, who is with Marina Coast Water District. She's a director. Jan Schreiner is here today. She already said hello in the chat. She's with Marina Coast Water District. She's a director as well. Christina Medina Dirksen, Marina City Council member, will be joining us. Ana Velasquez, Mayor of Soledad, will be joining us. And Karen Paul, Monterey Peninsula Water Management District Director, will be joining us today. And we probably will have elected officials who I left out, so please don't be shy. Be sure to say hello in our chat as well if I forgot to mention you, and that I apologize. Okay, a few more announcements before we jump right into our program. As many of you probably know, Juneteenth is around the corner. I put some information about the celebrations that we're having on the peninsula and in Salinas this weekend. And earlier this week, the Monterey County Board of Supervisors adopted a resolution recognizing the significance of Juneteenth. It's the first time. It's a huge, huge deal. And that was sponsored by the Democratic Women along with the Juneteenth Coalition. So we were really excited about that. It's a very momentous occasion. And then hours later, which I would like to think we had something to do with, but probably not, the U.S. Senate passed a bill recognizing Juneteenth as a federal holiday. So huge, huge, huge day on Tuesday. And that, of course, goes to the House, but it's looking good since it did pass the Senate unanimously. So a really big week and all the more occasion to celebrate this weekend with our friends. So I hope you will check that out. Also, I wanted to let everybody know our annual non-event fundraiser is still here, and we're still asking you to stay home and not come to our event. So you should have already received this letter, but there's no deadline to not attend our non-event. So please continue to give to DWMC. We really do need your support more than ever as we continue to rebuild our coffers for the upcoming elections. So thank you for that. We've already raised quite a bit of money, and thank you for your support. Additionally, I do want to also mention, and I dropped this in the chat as well, that the Monterey County Democrats will be hosting an event this Friday, the 18th, tomorrow, to celebrate the reopening of the Center for Change in Seaside. So I dropped that info in the chat. I believe there's more info on the Monterey County Democrats Facebook. Anyone else is welcome to drop some more info in the chat too, if anyone else is here. Excuse me. So I heard Assemblymember Robert Rivas and Congressman Panetta will likely be showing up. So be sure to go by and say hello to all your friends as we get ready to see people in person again. And then I also want to encourage everyone to make sure that your membership is current on Member Planet. So, despite moving online, we continue to provide honorariums for our speakers and still want to fundraise for candidates. So please, please, please renew your membership for 2020 if you haven't. And if you have any questions about your membership, you could please contact our membership chair, who is here today, Lisa Ziska Marchand, or you can email her at membership@dw-mc.org. And hopefully Lisa could drop that info in the chat for you too. So also wanted to mention, just on the lines of membership, if you're new, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We welcome you. This is a lot easier for us to do in person luncheons to get to know you and to mix and mingle, but we want to get to know you and welcome you. So please feel free to say, I'm new, and hopefully connect with some of our board members and our club members as well. Okay, so let's get ready for our program now. Just a few housekeeping items. As I mentioned earlier, this program is recorded, so it's posted to our website and wanted to let you all know. And when our keynote speakers are finished with their presentations today, we'll do a question and answer period. And we ask that you try to put your question in the chat, since it makes it a lot easier for myself and our other board members to find your question and make sure that we get to your question as well. And also, I want to note, if you're not on mute, if you could mute yourself during the presentations, that would be wonderful too, since we just don't want any background noise. So without further ado, I am going to introduce the wonderful Kenya Burton. Kenya Burton is the Salinas Youth Poet Laureate and an awardee of the New York Silver Key in Writing and NEA Big Read Award, and an activist from Salinas, California. Through her work, she tackles difficult themes around racism, classism, sexism, and other isms that plague America. She hopes to promote understanding and equality for the next generation. And Kenya will be performing her piece, When You Feed a City Its People. Go ahead, Kenya. Floor is yours.
Hi. Yeah, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you to Democratic Women for having me. This is a great space to be a part of, especially as a young woman of color. I love being in spaces like this where we are allowed seats, where we can discuss things that are substantially important to a lot of people. And for me, I'm currently still a student, so especially what we're talking about today is something I'm living through now. I am a pandemic student and trying to strive my way through it the best way I know how, and the best way that everyone's trying to figure it out, especially from people who work in education, teachers, staff, faculty, students. We're kind of all in the same boat. So when it comes to this piece, I ended up writing it when I was a senior in high school. I am a proud Eagle, Everett Alvarez graduate. I was born and raised in Salinas, California, and I come from a family of educators, so education has always been huge for me. So this piece was kind of a roundabout of everything that I had experienced growing up, what it was like for other students like me. And the biggest part of it was during our senior year, one of my favorite classes was AP Literature. And at the end, our teacher said we had to write a goodbye. And so it was saying goodbye to the 12 years we spent in education, to the people we knew and lost, and just basically what our experience was like. And so it was a moment of reflection where we went to other students, we went to peers, and we asked ourselves what were the things that we felt damaged us and were the most severe with our education. What were we dealing with that wasn't really spoken about? And for us, we were the class of 2018, and we were all the kids that came after 9/11. And so we always talked about how the responsibility and the pressure of being those war-torn kids, that we came after such a shift in our country and to how we are now, and we just had to roll with the punches. And so with this piece, it's really a reflection of not only what it was like for me as a student and now, but also what our kids are going to have to go through, because things are shifting so much. And I love giving my shout outs to teachers and educators, and especially now we are in such a difficult situation that we never saw coming. But to see that people are still passionate and they're like, we're going to do what we can, we're going to do the best that we can, especially in institutions like this, it really does show that at the end of the day, we are our brother's keepers, that we do what we need to do so that we can be the best that we can, and also make sure that the next generation that comes after us is the best that they can be. So this is my piece, and thank you again. To the class of 2018, the eagle is flying towards the sun. Please don't forget us. Recently, I've been thinking about the story when you give a mouse a cookie. A small mouse with enough force to destroy a house and everything in it. I don't think it was intended to be this stark, to convey a silent killer that sucks up all the possessions you've ever carried in your life. Reading this book to school children, I know their mind must be a kaleidoscope of ideas that my mind has drifted away from. How easily we lose imagination and dreams when we become older. Now, reading this story, I can't help but think of one thing: the mouse. It reminds me of the system of my school, my city, what it is like trying to find a space in a system that was never meant for me. Battered books and broken ceilings, walking miles for education, it's slipping through the cracks like every other person that looks like you. It feels like prison school pipeline and low graduation rates, no food at home and food too expensive at school. My graduating class learned a lot from books like this, from this system, how to close our mouths and keep our heads forward, cross the line and enter an entirely new world, too afraid that if we went against the norms that we would be swallowed up too. Because if we feed this system, won't we just make it bigger? It's really not about the mouse. The mouse is just a pawn, a heartbeat connected to an even bigger organism. We don't notice that this little girl is feeding rats and probably many others. And now her parents have to deal with rat infestation because their daughter keeps trying to be friends with rodents. As kids, we see the problem as small, but now I see it as a crisis. This system has been spitting kids like us out for generations. I'm not the first kid to write a poem, but I think I'm the first to talk about the problem of a small mouse overcrowded by hundreds of things and eating them with every bite but never full. I found my own copy of this book in the closet. The first couple of pages were ripped out, and in the date said 2001. My graduating class are survivors. No, the children of survivors, the September 1st, 2001 survivors, the two planes, Twin Towers down survivors. On the mark of our first we are alive, we became the beginning of a long stretch of red, blue, and white violence. We were the children that came with ammunition already packed in our lunch boxes for the next war. Our first words were liberty and patriotism, and we learned to draw pictures of a faraway freedom. We were the kids left behind when the world shifted to find justice. As my ripped and beaten book cover suggests, in 2001, we were named the children of tragedy. Wrapped in the arms of self-discovery, we marched on through the battle. When the explosion sounded around the world, we learned to breathe in silence like it was a tablespoon of cough syrup for the sickly. Forgotten in the background noise, we fought to even touch something as soft as peace. A tornado of a city always overshadowed by another hurricane, our school in the middle of a battleground, but our pencils never wavered. We did what we were told was best until there was no one there to guide us anymore. My class was moved away until the world we lived in became an entirely different place. The outside world consisted of surviving off WIC and a strong stomach. The line for welfare was always longer than the line to pick up schedules for college. We learned to choke down our hopes and dreams, doing whatever we were told without questioning the curriculum, following orders like good soldiers do. We learned to save our voices for better use and ask permission before we talked. For so long, we kept our true feelings undercover, waited till we got to our broken homes to cry. We thought that we could escape this system if we did what it wanted, that the only way to make a monster move was to feed it. If you give a mouse a cookie, it will eventually want more. I realize now that me and my classmates became so good at being soldiers, we forgot we were kids. And we wonder why now as adults we can't stop feeding into it even when it crumbles beneath our feet. Because it was never about the mouse, but about the system and the dark towers it built in its shadow. My generation were the survivors of war. This one, a pandemic. Obstacles that change but demand to be climbed, losing prom nights and first days of school, education through a keyboard. There will always be another mouse, another tragedy, another war, but it is what we make out of the wreckage that matters. I hope this next generation raises their voice, stomps their feet until they get what they want, send this system crashing to the ground and build a better one. We are all big fish in a small pond, so let's make it bigger and better. Let us not leave behind the kids that struggle or aren't from the best neighborhoods. We cannot keep feeding this mouse with unaccomplished dreams and hopes that it will never get hungry again. Calling the job too hard without even taking the first step. There are hardships ahead, ones that we were never prepared for, but we must endure. We are hurting in ways that could have never been imagined, but we always move forward. We give it our best shot and we continue. For the millions like us, times have changed and we must do our best to be the shoulder, the hand, and the guide, the one that was not always there for us. We cannot keep making soldiers out of children, turning lessons into hard love. I want children to have joy in the simple things, and the mouse and the little girl who became friends, a lifetime of memories that started with just one cookie, not infestation, poverty, and low wages. I want them to dream in their schools without thinking of what is outside the next door. To imagine a place where they can exist without the restraints of skin color, the obstacles of dollar figures, or worry about where their next meal will come from. I hope that we can give students a childhood that they can remember. If there is one thing that we have learned, it is that we cannot go on how we did before. Things will not be the same, and with it comes a chance to restart and renew together. Young and old, a new beginning for all of us, a lifetime of stories to pass on to eager ears, dreams to fulfill. My graduating class and yours will ensure that they won't be like us. They will be the sweet melodies passed down to the next generation, skyscrapers and giants who tackled the world even when it went quiet. We will sow into them and watch the tree that blossoms, the lightning that strikes upon the sky. Let them be big and bright and beautiful. The world has changed, and us too, but we will not lose what matters most. When the going gets tough, don't let them, don't let us slip away. Thank you.
Wow. Kenya, that was so powerful and a wonderful way to open up the discussion for today. Thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your beautiful art with us. Thank you so much. This is exactly what we're talking about today. So thank you. And
Thank you for
I
having
hope,
me.
oh, it's really, it's our honor. And we will, I hope you could stick with us for a little bit. I know you have to go back to work because our next speaker, Mr. Oscar Ramos, will be, who just posted in the chat that he loved your poem. So beautiful. We'll be talking about just that, what we're talking about today. So I'm just going to do a very brief introduction of Oscar Ramos and then let him take it away. But Oscar Ramos came from an immigrant family and is an award-winning teacher in Salinas. He was the inspiration for the documentary East of Salinas, which premiered on PBS and spotlighted educational disparities of students in the Salinas area. And today, Oscar is going to dive deeper into these disparities, which have been further exacerbated by the pandemic, as Kenya alluded to as well. So, Oscar, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Nicole. Um, yes. So it's a pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, my name is Oscar Ramos, and she just gave you a little brief intro as to who I am. I am a teacher, a second grade teacher at Sherwood Elementary School. I've been teaching for 25 years, but I've taught many different grades: high school, middle school, not very long. Sixth grade, third grade, and I am currently teaching second grade. So after 25 years, I think I'm finally getting the hang of this teaching thing. It takes a while. It takes a while. Um, I teach in in Sherwood School, which is in East Salinas. Um, I chose to teach there because the community. Um, I grew up a migrant student. I was an immigrant. I was born in Jalisco, Mexico, but I was raised in Hollister. Um, and I was born in Mexico because my mom went to go visit her mom, and I guess I couldn't wait to see the world because I didn't wait for her to get back to California. I was born in Mexico, um, and I attended school all throughout high school, elementary, high school in Hollister. Went to Cal, but came back and started working in Salinas because of its large um, Latinx community population, students. I had very little help growing up, and I didn't want my students here in Salinas to grow up kind of the same way I did, with very little help. And so I've been at that same school, same community for 25 years. I was featured in the New York Times and many other media outlets out there, and have won some awards. But I don't do this for the attention. I don't do this for the award. If I did, I would have quit very early on, because it took 20 years for people to see the work I was doing with the Latinx community. We don't, teachers don't do it for the attention. We do it because we care. And so the work I do is because I know the migrant community and the immigrant families. I know what they went through, what they're going through. I know that their difficulties, their struggles, their needs. And the difficulties that they're facing, they're not all new, and they're not all surprising. I grew up being a migrant, and guess what? Some of the so, what my students are facing today, I faced 30 years ago, 25 years ago, 35 years ago, with the exception of a few new ones, of course, that weren't around back in my day. The Latinx community still struggles with, you know, affordable housing. They you know, it's very expensive with comfortable living spaces. They don't have comfortable living space. Our students, I mean, I've visited homes where the kids are doing their homework and their desk is, you know, they turn over a laundry basket and that's their desk in the little corner. You know, safe environments, um, stability. They have to keep constantly moving and moving, following the harvest. And then if the landlord increases the rent, they move to a different place. Um, Obviously, low wages. You know, working out in the ag fields doesn't pay a whole lot, or provide healthcare. So healthcare is also an issue. Educational resources, they can't afford to pay for private tutors. It's hard for them to advocate for the kids if they have special needs. It just seems in my 25 years, I've seen that they're put in the back of the line, like, okay, we'll get to you eventually, back of the line, and they'll tend to help others that are a little bit more outspoken and more demanding. Hunger is huge in our community. Sleep deprivation, um, racial profiling, obviously, immigration issues, and there's a lot more than these issues. But these are just some of the ones that are prevalent that you could see. So having that long list, how do we expect our students to come to our class every day and tune all that out and then expect them to succeed and then still go about their day with a smile on their face, right? How do we expect them to do that? Well, the answer is we don't. We don't expect them to tune it out. We don't want them to tune it out. We expect them to shout and to scream and to share and to explain and to demand. We expect them to offer solutions and to make some suggestions because if we don't, how else are we going to know what they need and and how we can help if we just tell them to sit down and be quiet and just do what they're told. We don't want them to do that. Otherwise, you know, we'll never find solutions to those difficulties. um, I can't address all the topics I listed and others because you know it's a short presentation, 20 minutes, and then some questions and answers. But I will present on and talk about some of the ones that just break my heart that I see year after year. Um, and for that, in order for that, I'm gonna have to share my screen. So this is not when I sat down to think about what I wanted to talk about. I made the decision like I don't want to turn this into some formal scripted read this, cover this. I wanted it to be more of a conversation. I wanted to throw things out there so you guys can think about it, and maybe in the question and answer period, you guys can take that a bit further, and I can explain a bit more. Um, but I will share my screen, and I'll show you some of the things that I'm talking about. Now, the biggest thing that we saw during COVID, huge problem, was um, technology. Our kids in our communities don't have MacBook Pros. They don't have good PCs, or if they don't have it at all. So at the very beginning, you know, that was a huge problem. And well, if you have a computer, you need internet access. You need reliable Wi-Fi. In our community, you know what? They rather have dinner for the week, for the month, than to pay for high-priced Wi-Fi. And so that was huge. That was a huge problem. Luckily, the district provided Chromebooks. Um, Not the best, but it did the job. They provided hotspots, but that still didn't address um, that addressed part of the problem, not everything, because some of our students live in places where they don't get a signal, whether it's a regular Wi-Fi or hotspot. So what did they do? They would have to go somewhere else to find an internet signal. And so I don't know. I don't know if, can you see my screen or you can't see my screen?
We can't see it yet,
Okay.
but you should be able to share.
Yes. So we tried this earlier, right? Oh my goodness. Hold on. Believe it or not, this is a brand new computer. And so it's asking me to.
Probably asking you to update it.
Okay, this should work. Probably not. Oh, well, this is going to be a bummer if I can't share because the whole presentation. Okay. Okay, let's see. Now can you see it?
Yes, we can see it now.
Perfect. So I don't know if a lot of you saw this this picture on social media, but it was everywhere. It made national news. These two students are first graders with a Chromebook in their lap, sitting in a Taco Bell parking lot because they needed to log in. They needed to log in to you know, to school, and they didn't have. They were given the Chromebook, but they were given at this time they didn't have the hotspot. But even with the hotspot, they couldn't get a signal. So our biggest problem at the very beginning was this. We have in elementary, we have a class of 25, 28, 29 students. At the very first week, it was, we'd get half the students, maybe less, because they didn't have what they needed. It took a while for them to get everything. And so that is that was our biggest problem there. And it did. It was social media. It was in the local news. It was national news. It was everywhere. So that was the first picture I wanted to share because even after they're given the hotspots, it was a daily struggle. It was a daily struggle where you'd have students, you could see them, and then all of a sudden they disappear and like they log back. Sorry, teacher. I'm at the babysitters and they don't have internet here, or I'm in a spot where I don't get a reliable signal. So, or there were times where they didn't log in for several days, and we would call, and the office would call, the principal would call, and the problem wasn't that the kids weren't trying. The problem was either the technology or the Wi-Fi signal. So during my time teaching, I mentioned sleep deprivation, and by that I mean is especially during the harvest season. Parents have to get up really early, and they take their kids to the babysitter, and the kids lose a lot of sleep. In my class, I would have students come in the morning and they would fall asleep. Now, I never said anything because I grew up that way and I knew what was going on. They weren't sleeping, and you just had to just leave them alone for a little bit. And so I'm going to put images to some of the issues that I'm bringing up. Okay, and this is from east of Salinas. I know you've heard these issues before, but to put video and images to these problems, it really drives the point home. So hopefully everything works out and you can hear. So the first one is, kids coming in extremely sleepy. And if you don't know why they're coming in sleepy, you would think, well, you should go to bed earlier, or what time are you going to bed? it's not really bedtime most of the time. It's life.
When I get up in the morning, I go and brush my teeth, get ready for school, and then my mom drops me out with a babysitter, for the babysitter could wake me up at 6 o'clock. It's the same every day.
Todos los días me levanto a las 3 de la mañana. Voy a dejar los niños con la babysitter y de ahí me voy caminando para agarrar el bus para irme a trabajar.
So we have teachers that have been at Sherwood, and not just at Sherwood School. We have other schools in the east side with the similar populations where if you don't know this, your first reaction is to yell at the student, to snap out of it, to wake up. Why are you sleeping? I remember a time in it was in high school where one of my friends fell asleep, and this was high school, and he fell asleep because of the same thing, and the teacher didn't understand why he was falling asleep, and what his reaction was is he got, at the time, there wasn't a whiteboard, it was the old projectors where you write and it projects, and you would clean it with a spray bottle. And what he did is, to wake him up, he sprayed his face. He's like, get up, wake up, why are you falling asleep? That was his reaction. Obviously he did not understand what was going on. So waking up an 8-year-old at 4 a.m. so he can go to the babysitters. Now he said the babysitter will wake him up at 6, but how much? He already lost a lot of sleep, a lot of rest between 4 and 5. He's not going to go and sleep like if he was sleeping at his home. And you know how important sleep is. We've all hit that snooze button because we just want 10 more minutes of sleep. Imagine an 8-year-old having to wake up at 4 a.m. every day and do that. And another problem that we face, and some people don't understand, is the problem of hunger. But they get fed at school. They have breakfast and they have lunch. Well, yeah, and that's their sanctuary. That's when they get to eat a lot of, especially when the harvest season is over. There's no jobs and there's very little money coming in. And so there is a scene in the documentary where the mom opens the refrigerator and all she has is like 2 gallons of milk in there, and that was it. But to hear an 8-year-old describe what it feels like to be hungry is heartbreaking. And I believe that this is the scene. So let's see.
It's kind of hard to keep up getting food since Hyman's gone. Sometimes we don't have nothing to eat, and we don't have food for my mom to make like something to cook. So we have to sleep without eating until the morning, until we go to school.
Where did you get 7, David?
You have to count all of it.
You have to count all of them.
Sometimes if you don't eat for a long time, your stomach starts to hurt and starts growling or something.
So it took 3 years to film this documentary, and I was there for most of it. There are scenes that I saw for the first time when the documentary was when it premiered on PBS. I could hardly hold back the tears because I knew about these problems, but to hear it coming out of an 8-year-old's mouth and describe it, it was just heartbreaking. Um, we used to have a program where kids would get an additional snack during the day. Yeah, they would get fruit, fresh fruit, um, and there were some students who would say after they had their snack, they would ask for another one. Is there any extras? Can I have another one? Or there were some students that would say, when are we going to have our snack? Can we have our snack yet? Can we have it now? And there were teachers at Sherwood School that would just tell them like, not yet, go sit down. You know, we'll have it when we'll have it. And no, you can't have, you already had one. And then they saw this documentary and they said like, I understand now. I know why they're asking for a second one. I know why they're asking to get the snack so early. They had no idea. And they had been teaching there for years. So it's devastating. And then of course I talked about the housing. Um, I know it's a problem everywhere. Um, it's very expensive, but I'm not talking about just how expensive. Oh, there's a picture of, look at that. I didn't even try and I got it. That's what they had um, in their fridge. That was the whole thing. Um, so yeah, I'm not talking about just how expensive it is. I'm talking about the quality of the housing too, right? This family, during the 3 years of filming, um, they moved, I believe it was 5 times, because of rent, because of safety issues, um, a whole range of issues. But I this was one of the scenes that I saw for the first time when it premiered. Now I knew about stuff like that, but again, to hear it and to see it is heartbreaking.
2 days before, my mom saw a lizard in the house, and a mouse was in the oven. There were cockroaches, ants, flies, rats, there were iguanas. I don't even know how that got in there. So my mom decided to move.
So again, not just how expensive it is, but you find something that is kind of affordable. But what happens? You end up in a place like he's describing. How are you supposed to expect kids to, first priority is, let me learn my multiplication tables, where they didn't get enough sleep, where they didn't have enough to eat, where they have to worry about competing with mice or rats for a living space. It's very difficult, and that's why I said earlier, you know, no, we don't want them to just sit down and be quiet. We want them to scream and shout and tell us what's going on and what's happening, so we can figure out what's the best way to help them. Um, there's a bunch of stuff in here. There's clips on immigration. The list, it's all in here in this documentary. They did a fabulous job covering all the topics. I won't show all of them, but so as teachers, we have to figure out, well, what can we do? And we create programs and we find ways to to bring food, bring clothing, um, uh, programs after school. It's a wide range. We do have a family resource center that's full and stocked with rice and beans and canned foods and shirts and pants for you, because we're a uniform district for uniforms. Um, but it's a huge problem. Homelessness. In our district, it was something like 40% or a little above of our elementary kids were considered homeless. And as far as hunger, it was like 1 in 3 of our students and 1 in 4 of the adults were affected by food scarcity. And these are all well documented. You can Google it. These are all facts. These are all true. Um, so yes, but when we figured out how to help them out, it's fantastic because you look at the end result. If you did just enough,
Think of what color.
you get to see it. You get to see and you get to be proud of what you did for these students. And so this little guy in 3rd grade, they started filming him, and he started by saying he wanted to be a police officer. And so during school and during the programs, and I took him on field trips. I take my kids to UC Berkeley. They get to see the campus. They get to talk to people who grew up just like them. They get to get inspired. And so he wanted, at the very beginning, he wanted to be a police officer. Then after a year or two, he said, no, I want to be a teacher. And toward the end of the filming, he said he wanted to be something else, which I saw the progression, the inspiration, the motivation for him to succeed. And this last scene is why we do it. This is the end result. This is why we do what we do.
When I grow up, I think I want to be an engineer. An engineer has to really know math, and I like math. And also, I have a good time building stuff. It's fun. There's always a chance to do what you want to do. As long as you don't give up, yeah.
As long as you don't give up. And guess what? He didn't give up. He is a senior now in high school. He just graduated. He got accepted to UC Berkeley, along with some of my other former students. And not just that, he got the Fiat Lux scholarship, which means he gets to go, he doesn't pay anything. They're full ride to UC Berkeley. Just after all of the struggles and the difficulty, he never gave up. We never gave up. And I'm not just talking me, I'm talking teachers in general. All our teachers are fabulous. And it just happens that they filmed me doing this with students. But teachers do this all the time. They inspire, they motivate. So at the very beginning, so like, well, what can we do? What do we want? I mean, what do we want? You guys have seen these. Like, we want equality. The assumption is that everyone benefits from the same support. Like, well, wait a minute. As you see the illustration, equality, not really the greatest. So then we changed. Like, okay, well, if it's not equality, then what? We said, well, we want equity. Everyone gets support, the support that they need, right? But that would be great. But what's the reality? The reality is that one gets more than is needed, while others get less than is needed. And we see this all the time. So at the end, what we really want is justice. Justice. No offense. Okay, all three can see the game without supports or accommodations, because the causes of the inequality was addressed. The systematic barrier has been removed, and that was part of the poem. Systems. that's why we don't want our students to stay quiet. We need to know. That's the fence is what we need to know. What's in the way? Let's take that away. And so this they kept adding. If you guys have seen this illustration, they kept adding and adding to it. At first, it was just equality and equity, and then they added another one. Then they added another. Who knows if they might find something else? But this is what it is. This is what we deal with day after day as teachers, and not just teachers. It's people. Um, and so that was a conversation I wanted to have, not necessarily a formal scripted presentation dialogue where I go step by step, but just sharing and throwing out some of the stuff that we see and that we have to.
Well, and thank you so much for this is so important. And I'm glad that we followed up on the year that the little boy was accepted into to UC Berkeley too. It seems like it's a good year for him, and that's a wonderful way that story ends. But I know it's not always that way. We know it's not always that way. I hope that you will stick around. We will have a question and answer period right after our next professor, Mr. Ramos, but you're such an inspiration. Thank you for all that you do in East Salinas. I know it's an uphill battle, and we'll talk more about that. And our next presenter actually is no stranger to that uphill battle as well. Our next speaker is Ms. Vanessa Robinson, who is a teacher in Greenfield and also a California Teachers Association delegate. And like Oscar, Vanessa has dedicated her life to teaching underserved youth in Monterey County. She's also very active in politics and always rooted in advocating for better lives of children. So this is a perfect segue into Vanessa. You have the floor? Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your presentation today?
Absolutely. And I think it's very fitting that I came kind of after Kenya and after Oscar. Oscar is my fellow union brother here in the Central Coast Service Center, and I can attest just by not only in the classroom, but outside of the classroom, he is a complete champion and warrior and advocate for not just our students, but our communities and their families, and for the betterment of the entire Salinas and Monterey County as a whole. So just wanted to say thank you, Oscar, for everything you do. You're 25 years, double mine, but you definitely are paving the way for advocate teachers like myself coming up behind you. So thank you. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Salinas. Attended all the schools here. I feel like my mom was a single mother. So we did bounce around for housing as well, similar to some of the students seen in this video. Definitely the disparities I faced were nowhere to the magnitude of them, but I understand what it was like to grow up in Salinas and face housing insecurities. Not to say that my family didn't have means, but my mom, as a single mom, was determined to do it on her own, and it's not easy in this county. I ended up graduating from Monterey High. My mom remarried, we moved, and I went straight to CSUMB out of high school. For a while, I grappled with not leaving. Should I have left? But I think fast forward 16 years, it was exactly what I needed to do and where I needed to be. And the reason for that is, if you're familiar with CSUMB and any of their majors, their mission statement, it is very multicultural and service-based. And so through my undergraduate career, I learned a lot about what it meant to not only create a better life for myself, but how in order to do that, it has to serve the whole community as well. So at CSUMB, I started with my teaching degree, was able to start substitute teaching in South County, where my mom is a teacher and my aunt as well. And just everything about the opportunity that was given to me to serve that population was the reason I stayed. And so I started my career in Gonzales, and I'm in Greenfield now, and got really heavy in the union early on. And all of that has kind of compiled into what I wanted to talk to you all about today. And I wanted to use the word symbolism to sort of define, I think, what has happened in education and in our nation, right? Any social issues that we've been dealing with over the past year due to the pandemic. Because it's starting to scream louder and louder, and I'm hoping people are paying attention that a lot of what's been going on for generations and generations is not a secret. But what has been mainstream put in our face or brought to us is the symbolism that our nation is willing to throw out there to satisfy certain groups. So we think about over the past year with the Black Lives Matter movement, right? We've got streets named Black Lives Matter. We have murals everywhere, and elected officials willing to say it, but no charges on Breonna Taylor's killers, right? We still are choking over the phrase defund the police. Symbolism. Also, we talk about the essential workers. This video exasperated that, right? We have the people who are literally growing our food, not able to eat our food, right? And so we think about the nurses and the farm workers and all the commercials I've seen over the past year applauding them, but we have yet to raise wages. We've yet to provide housing opportunities. We've yet to put our money, or them put their money where their mouth is. And it just leads up to Tuesday. I hate to be a damper on it, but Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday, but in Georgia, they're literally blocking the teaching of critical race theory, which essentially is an irony, because how do you explain a federal holiday that is by definition celebrating the last group of people to find out they were freed of slavery without being able to discuss slavery, or without being able to discuss the truths about, that state that wanted to keep the proclamation a secret from those people? So again, we're continuing to go in this circle of symbolism. And I think that over the past year in education, educators like Oscar and myself and people who have been willing to do the work have really slowly been fighting blood tooth and nail to kind of break that whole idea of that's enough. So we've started, with our union work, yelling and shouting outside of the lines. We're demanding more, we're asking for more. And really, like Dr. Tanya Jaco is one of our new director-elects for our union's region. And something that she says that is the reason why I supported her so wholeheartedly in leading our region of teachers unions and pushing forward what our schools need is like, we can't go back to normal. And I hope everybody feels that, not just teachers. We can't go back to the way things were before. The way things were before is exactly what Oscar just showed you. That teachers in the classroom, people connected to the system, people connected to the kids and the family know exactly what's going on. Like Oscar said, he knew exactly what was happening. But no one's doing anything about it except for us. And we cannot, ourselves, teachers, solve the problem on our own. Absolutely not. And so one thing that she continues to push and urge, and I think it shouldn't just be heard by teachers, is we have to start reimagining what we have, like the way we do things. Start imagining like what hasn't been drawn yet. She says we need to draw outside the lines, right? And what does that look like? And what is everybody's responsibility in creating that new reality, right? Ethnic studies is a way to start in our schools. But at the state level, what was recommended for ethnic studies was very watered down. It was more of like mentioning different groups exist. Kids know that, right? Even on the level of supporting the ethnic studies curriculum that was proposed, CTA, California Teachers Association, took no position on it. We felt it had no teeth, it wasn't deep enough, and it goes along the lines of everything that across the country has been happening in more oppressed areas, like wanting to ban critical race theory. And it's something that we have to push more on. So myself and some other union members, what we've been doing, and what I think that all residents in Monterey County can support, is shifting racial narratives in our classroom through literature. We've done a lot of talks to educate other educators, credential program teachers, and just anybody kind of willing to listen about how powerful seeing yourself in a different light can be, and how literature can support that in the classroom. So thinking about not being a teacher, how can you support that movement? Talking with any school board members that you know, most school board members are not actually teachers, right? And asking the tough questions about what kind of literature is a priority to be taught in your classrooms. Really getting people to look at the libraries in their rooms. Oops, sorry. I got a call. I hope it probably froze me. Getting people to look at the libraries in the rooms, the stories they're sharing, and how that shifts or shapes a narrative of certain groups of people in our counties. And this specifically speaks to our students that we serve, because most of the stereotype of immigrants is, you know, illegally coming into the country. We have politicians who are creating stories about them. But this PBIS documentary in and of itself shows an entirely different light on what it's like to be an immigrant and to serve the country that you're here for and to want a better life. There's other ways to see that image other than a PBIS special that takes 3 years to film, right? God bless them for doing it. But we also have to start asking ourselves, why are we waiting for those moments to teach the real stories of the people who literally are building our communities? So then I want to ask, and hopefully everybody continues to ask even after this, is how do we get away from, you know, symbolic efforts in education? And I feel like, again, like I mentioned, it's not just on the teachers or the districts. I think when we hear elected officials and city or county leaders quick to use the response that the funding comes from the districts when we're talking about schools, when we're talking about the photo that Oscar showed of the girls in the Wi-Fi, those are residents of your city, right? Those are residents of the county. Those students don't live in school buildings. They don't live in district offices. They live in your cities. So again, symbolic gestures. How can we assist that, right? So one thing I continue to tell educators and other people in the community and residents is, like, think about what do you want to do versus what do you want to be. And I think those are things that we need to look at in our leaders also, district leaders, city leaders, and county leaders. Way too often, people I've worked for, people who've represented me, are more about who they want to be versus what they want to do. Less talking, more doing, right? Instead of having conversations, I'm sorry, over the past year, I'm absolutely exhausted and having conversations about things. And like, we need to just start doing stuff. I love that Oscar showed that image about the equality, right? And so the way I see justice is removing the barriers. We talk about equality, the word that's like the 50s, that's way played out. Equity, we still have people who are choking over the words equity, right? Like, well, it's a handout. It's socialism. If you work hard enough, you can have it. We absolutely have to know better and be okay with admitting that there are legitimate systems in place that prevent you from attaining the things you've worked for. And the only answer is to give everybody what they need at this point, other than shooting for the ultimate goal, which was the image that Oscar showed, which was removing the fence. But what that means is removing the barriers. And what is the barrier right now? Systemic racism, systemic oppression. It is ingrained into our institutions, which is why critical race theory is so important, which is why ethnic studies and the truth about history in classrooms is so important. But it is also exactly why our elected officials don't want it to happen. Because what does that mean? A paradigm shift in power, a paradigm shift in how we do things, a shift in how we look at policies and procedures, not just at the school level, but at the city level. Possibly a way to get them to stop saying that funding comes from the districts and from the states when we are asking for resources for our kids. And that circles us right back to, what did COVID do? What does all that mean? We have received historically more more funding in California for education than ever before in history. And this is not something that, I mean, maybe reading it in a news headline, oh my God, this is amazing, right? Coming from the classroom and coming from the teachers, it's disrespectful. It is something I'm not applauding. It's something I'm not happy about because I know exactly where it's stemming from. Capitalism. It is not finally realizing that we should prioritize people over profit. It is flaunting money and saturating places with the funding needed so that profit can continue. I don't know if anybody else is completely exhausted by Gavin Newsom's tweets and Instagram posts that sound like a Jeopardy game show or like an Apple Store giveaway. It's almost dehumanizing, and it's insane. So this just trickles right back into what's happening in the schools. What I've seen over the past year with that money, what's more important than getting that money is how do you use that money, right? Just spend the money. That's my answer. Start looking for leaders and elected officials who are willing to spend the money. In my district, we received on different benchmarks up to $5 million regularly, and we will receive triple that next year in one-time funding. But one thing that my superintendent, my leader, who I completely idolize all my career as well, is spent all the money on the kids every dime. I'm the vice president of our local union, so we meet weekly on a Wednesday just to discuss like the state of the district with our HR, with our director of education, with our maintenance team. And I can tell you up until the very last day of school, every single department in our district was thinking about how can we spend this money on the kids. Yes, do teachers deserve some of that? Absolutely. No, that was not the focus of any of our unions in this county. The focus for that money was going towards ending these disparities that have been historically imposed on our students and our classrooms because we have the money now. And so I applaud the districts that did it right. And I'm still struggling with the ones who, you know, Carmel was ready to sue, was trying to sue their union president because they're asking for money to be spent more on safety. They were asking for more money to be spent on teachers for resources to do their jobs better. What was fallen, I think, on deaf ears a lot this year was like that we knew how to do what we were doing. We had no idea how to do what we were doing. And again, if your district station, we're not willing to call each other out on what's happening in our different silos of the county. So yes, teachers unions are very upset. And we weren't upset because we were being asked to come back into the classroom, and we weren't upset because we weren't getting money. We were upset because we were finally seeing that we need support, and when asking for it, we were being villainized. And being villainized in one of the most challenging times of our profession and of history in and of itself, because as I mentioned before, one of the other huge misconceptions is that we knew what we were doing. Like we were building the plane while we were flying it. So like I tell my students, I really wanted to just end with this. It's 3 things I always tell them, and I've mentioned it kind of sprinkled throughout this, is like, what do you want to do versus who do you want to be? And in order to figure that out, you have to remove yourself from your work so that it's not about you, it's about something else, and to lead with purpose instead of passion. Because what I've seen over this past year is those who are passionate about something or those who lead with passion expect something in return most of the time. I care so much about this and I need it to be done versus this is a purpose. This is an everyday work. This is something I work for always. And I just don't stop until it's done, right? Outside of us. So yeah, I wanted my time to be spent on hopefully giving people a direction with after we see, you know, hearing from the youth, Kenya herself, and what growing up in Salinas and going to school here was like. And Oscar, who's done the work for decades and has proof of and visual proof of exactly what's going on in our county. And just kind of wrapping it up with, I've seen all sides. I've seen great leadership. I've seen awful leadership. I've seen the advocacy piece and I've been a part of it. I've made strides, but I've also lost a lot of battles in this past year. And if anything I've learned, it's just we need everybody in this county to be on the same page about when we go back to normal, right? When we go back to normal, the air quote normal that governor wants us to return to. Education and our thoughts on who our teachers are in this county and what they need and the supports our students need cannot go back to what it was. It absolutely can't go back to what it was. The pressure has to be put on everybody who is a voting member of this community and this county to scream from the rooftops that education has to be a priority. My superintendent always says that we are a dedicated team completing an arduous task of breaking the cycle of poverty. And if there's one thing that we know education can do when it's done right, and that means supported by elected officials and financial institutes, because teachers do it right every time, but most of the time on our dollar. When it's done right, we can absolutely break this cycle of poverty for our students. Because unfortunately, too often what we see is they are born into poverty. They make mediocre gains because the system continues to keep them in poverty. And if they are not successful in their education, they marry into poverty and they reproduce into poverty. And it literally is a dangerous cycle. Thank the Lord that Oscar's student is one of those who we can say is on his way out, right? But those are far, far few in between of stories. And I think every single one of us can do something about it. It starts with elections. So I love Democratic Women in Monterey County. It starts with leadership at even the superintendent levels. It starts with school boards, all of that. And so I want to leave time for questions because I do see some coming in the chat. And I know we had a glitch. Yes.
Yes, thank you. And I just apologize profusely for the glitch. This is so important. And thank you so much, Vanessa, I think having you and Oscar here, this has been a topic that's of interest to our board, to our club members. We've heard loud and clear. I also want to thank Monica, our board member who's here, for helping connect us with you both and helping suggest in Kenya as well, because she's an amazing youth. I just want to note that when we give our speakers honorariums, and Kenya didn't want to accept our honorarium. She asked us to donate it to the Juneteenth Coalition. So just exactly along the lines of what you're saying, Vanessa, there's a lot of throwing money at issues, throwing money at people. It's more than that. We really need to be doing more than that. So I want to get to the questions. Sharon Miller already has a question in the chat. She asked this earlier, so thank you, Sharon, for coming back and asking your question. But it could be for both of you. Can you recommend, because you both spoke about literature, so can you both recommend books for kids in the classrooms? That's something that we could easily be funding, easily be getting into the classrooms. She says, what do you think about recommending school personnel and high school students reading Isabel Wilkinson's Cast?
I have laundry list of books, and so I will email that to Josie and hopefully she can find you. And these are ones that, again, my colleagues and union brothers and sisters have done tons of book talk roundtables about. We've used them in our classrooms. We've developed like mini curriculums for them, but above and beyond that, I think access to them is a number one start for kids. So I will send those book lists over. I don't know if the Cast, I'm not familiar with that book. If you want to unmute and just give me the scope of it, and I can just say, like, usually I can think of a topic and say right away, like yes or no.
It's from a Pulitzer Prize winning author. New book this year that is about how there's a caste system that takes the certain people and puts them at the bottom, and then other people at the top. And she doesn't use the word race, she uses the word caste, but it gives us a really good lens through which to look at what's going on now, what has happened in the past. So it explains systemic racism and does some comparisons with the caste system in India and what happened in Nazi Germany. The Monterey Public School The library is doing a big read on it. The Community Foundation of Monterey is doing a big read on it. A lot of churches in the area have done study groups on it. So check it out and you might see.
Yeah, and I think absolutely support it. I know a lot of conversations that we had. I was a panelist at the University of Hong Kong a couple weeks ago in their American Studies capstone class. And we did talk a lot about popular American culture right now and what's happening in caste systems in foreign countries. What I would say would be really, really beneficial is finding a strong connection to American culture when talking about that, because what we can run into when only speaking about the caste system is that it's not an intersectional problem, and instead it's within our own cultural groups, because that is true as well. Like we have, you know, in Mexico and in Latina communities, there's kind of a hierarchy system as well. And even in the African American community with skin tones. So it happens inside often, but I think that that really strongly has to be connected to what that looks like in modern American culture and how that transcends across racial groups and even genders and all of that, right?
Oh, somehow you muted, but absolutely. That's absolutely. Oscar, did you want to add anything? Any favorite literature?
No, but I'm part of the Central Coast Counties Service Center under their human rights representative, and I know our equity team was working on creating a list for elementary, the elementary level, and again, just like Vanessa said, if there's somewhere where we could email that list and everyone can have access to it, or if they send it on or put it on your website or whatever, I'd be more than happy to do that as well.
Great. Yeah, we will find a way to do that. Again, that's an easy call to action for us. And as Monica noted in the chat too, we're so appreciative of you both sitting here and having brutally honest conversations with us. We at the Democratic Women, we don't shy away from those uncomfortable conversations, and we so appreciate your willingness to have them with us. For those who signed back on, were there any other questions too while we're sitting in this uncomfortable space? Okay. I think I wanted to also bring to your attention, with Juneteenth around the corner, and I know I was really careful in my remarks with Juneteenth at the Monterey County Board of Supervisors earlier this week, because let's celebrate, but also let's do a little bit more than that. There's a lot more we could be doing in terms of actions, and we can't just sit here and be comfortable. One thing that Democratic Women we don't shy away from either is talking about the topic of defunding the police. We have a policy on our website. I would like you both, invite you both to check it out. It's Reimagining Police. And we've asked our elected officials to sign on and to do more than that, but actually start taking it to heart. So we are having those conversations as well. And I just wanted to highlight that as something that another call to action that this board has been a part of. Thank you, Kate, just dropped the link in the chat. So I want to make sure that everybody checks that out too. And then I wrote down some questions. Sorry, I got thrown off by everything as well. Any other questions? Actually, I want to take questions from club members too. And you could feel free to put them in the chat or try to raise your hand or wave me down. Monica, was there anything that you wanted to add? You had a lot in the chat, and I wanted to make sure I didn't miss a question when we zoomed out.
Well, it's just, I'm still reflecting and taking everything in, because listening to Vanessa and seeing, listening to Oscar and listening to Kenya, all of this brings up a lot of emotions, and I feel like I'm stuck in the middle. Like what Oscar said, we have it, like those pictures of the refrigerator, being woken up at 4 a.m. to go to the babysitters. It's like all of that comes up, and there's a lot of feelings involved in that, and it's still very emotional for me, to process all these things that, I thought we had moved past that, at least made some advancement, but what is holding us back? It's like what I mean, we constantly been told, it's you schooling is free. We should be appreciative, and I feel like in my community sometimes we feel like we don't deserve more than what we already given, and making that transition to the other side. It's like, wait a minute, we deserve more than what we are getting. And Vanessa brought that point, like, yes, it's like we work so hard for, the little that we receive. Our parents are, their bodies are decomposed. My father is just right now, tendons broken, and it's really heartbreaking, that these jobs are so meaning, like so low. And it reflects to me, are we really free? Are we done with slavery? We're in the foot of, Juneteenth. And listening to both of you, makes me question that. Are we really free? Because when the pandemic hit and people had to choose between going to work and, exposing themselves to this deadly disease, it was, I didn't think that that was something that it can come down to this in this country, and it did, and it happened. So what are we doing? It's like, yes, we cannot go back to being normal, and it starts from the very bottom. It starts from the very bottom, and we got to learn how to work with what we got already. We know that our families are low resources, and we know that, many of them do not have the education. My father only went to school till third grade. My mother made it to fifth grade. That impacted on us, so, how do we work with that? How do we move past that? And I think literature is really, really great, but working with the families with what strengths they have, strength-based, and building relationships, God has to be at the center of whatever we decide to do. It's like whatever we come together to do, it has to be relationship-based and strength-based. We know our culture has a big love for family, and we need to use that. We need to, capitalize our bilingualism. Just on that, it's like we spend so much money in educating our children and erasing their mother tongue only to reteach it to them again when they get to high school, and make it a requirement, so why are we taking away from what we can build up on, so thank you guys very much. It's like, I'm still taking a lot of this in.
And I'm so happy you mentioned one thing, Monica. Like, I'm just questioning. That is the goal, right? And that's always been a goal for me in my classroom with my students too, is question it. This is exactly what you need to be doing. It can feel super uncomfortable and you can feel lost and heartbroken because you don't have the answer. But as long as you're questioning it, and you're constantly questioning it, and why don't we have more? And I love that you mentioned that we felt, because I've seen this in Gonzales and in Greenfield, that they're just so appreciative for what we do. It's like, no, you do deserve so much more. And so what I hope is that no one forgets, whether it's this conversation or whatever else you've seen during the pandemic, in any other sector, like you mentioned, choosing between going to work and staying safe, that starts in the classroom as well. People with the better education, right? The more resources were able to stay home and didn't have to make those choices. So we just think about like how this ripple effect continues. And I just hope you keep questioning, Monica, and you keep questioning loud and fiercely, and that we just don't forget. Yes.
I think we need more people, good people on our side. And by that, I mean, so they've asked me if I've considered going into politics. I said, well, no, because I would get blackballed right away for speaking the truth and not being afraid to speak the truth. Politicians, they make a lot of promises, and then they really don't work for us after they're elected. They work to fundraise so they can get reelected, and that's their main. It seems like that's their main focus. They're afraid to take a side because, okay, if I take this side, which I know is right, well, I'm going to upset these people. So I'd rather just stay quiet and not say that. And there are people that I've confronted. Our Monterey County ag commissioner, for example, he praises Cesar Chavez, and I grew up migrant and homeless, and I worked this field and I worked that. And when we've met with him to about pesticide reform and just notifications, so schools that are near the fields, they're notified. He's against all of that. And I said, well, wait a minute. Why are you saying Cesar Chavez is your hero? Like, what would he tell you right now if you said, like, yeah, I'm not going to do that? Do you work for us, for the people, for the children, the community, or are you protecting the ag companies? Because what are they doing? Are they giving you money for real, whatever it might be? So we need people who aren't afraid to speak up and take sides and be willing to upset the other side.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like you both just wrapped it up, and Monica just wrapped it up. We, we are committed to making sure that we do our best to hold our electeds feet to the fire, and that we make sure that we get our elected officials in there, people who represent our values and who walk the walk. So you're so right. There's a lot of work to be done. And just know that Democratic Women, Monterey County, we stand with you, and we're here to stand in the uncomfortable conversations. And just to bring it back to how Kenya started it off, it's something really struck me from her poem. The constant shift of justice. It really stood out to me when she said that. We're constantly shifting what justice means, and we should be. But it's one thing to say; it's another thing to do it. So. Thank you both so much. And I would just, we're a little bit over time, but since we again zoomed out, we had a little tech issue. If there's just anything that you want to leave us with too, we'll work to get those literature lists. We want to get those shared with our members, and we want to, share what we have with you too. So, but if there's any last things that you'd like to mention to send us on home, that'd be great.
No, but someone had mentioned where they could see the documentary, and unfortunately, PBS owns the rights, and every once in a while they'll put it out on YouTube, on everywhere, so they could watch the whole thing. Unfortunately, they take it down as well. But we do screenings all over the U.S. So if anyone who is watching is knows someone, an organization, or anything that would like to have a screening of the documentary, feel free to contact me, and then we could do that. But thank you for the invitation. I had a wonderful time, and it was good to see Vanessa again.
Nicole,
Yeah,
can
and,
we unmute for a round of applause? Oh, I'm sorry, Vanessa.
No, go ahead,
No,
Vanessa.
I was just gonna say, I was just gonna thank you again. I kind of mentioned it earlier, finding the nuggets of people doing the work. Those are, I mean, I love to watch, not just because it's me, but anybody spotlighted for actually boots on the ground where the rubber meets the road, and still having the wherewithal to carry through the task, right? Piggyback kind of off what Oscar said too. We do have courageous elected officials as well, but I think that all of it just goes down to that one: what do you want to do versus who do you want to be? I think if we can vet that with people, and then I think that if we can just remind people to do instead of to be, remove the ego, we can all do great work. Like, honestly, we can. So thank you again for the invitation. It's great seeing you too, Oscar, and I will send you guys those book lists as well.
Great. Thank you. And thank you everybody for signing back on and for sticking with us. I'm so sorry about the Zoom issues, but this is where we are. That's where we are. So please, if you also want to go back, and we will post the recordings on our website so we can make sure that no one missed anything really important. And I just want to again thank you both. And if we can all unmute and just give our awesome speakers a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, everybody, for being here. To be continued.